On a warm and golden June evening in a quiet Arizona suburb, the kind of evening where the heat clings to the air even after sunset and the sky glows like melting copper, a backyard barbecue unfolded with the gentle chaos of pure American normalcy. From the height of a god's perspective, the yard looked like a tiny glowing island, string lights swaying above folding tables, lawn chairs scattered unevenly, a cooler overflowing with beer sweating in the heat, children dashing barefoot through freshly cut grass. The scent of charred corn and sizzling ribs curled upward toward the sky in wavering streams. In the center of it all stood Mark Halley, mid-40s, sunburned shoulders, holding a spatula in one hand and a half-assembled burger in the other, completely unaware that he had less than a minute before the fabric of his life, and the fabric of reality itself, would split open around him. If you're new here, subscribe to UFO Chronicles Archive for more eerie stories like this, real encounters, impossible events, and the unseen forces that disturb ordinary American nights. The first sign something was wrong came not with a sound, but with the absence of one. From above, it looked like a sudden freezing of an entire ecosystem. The world simply stopped. The laughter of the children didn't fade, it halted mid-note. Smoke rising from the grill locked itself into a still gray pillar. The dog, mid-leap, hung motionless inches above the grass, suspended like a photograph in time. Not a single molecule of air moved. The entire backyard, each leaf, each breeze, each breath was trapped in perfect stillness. Except for Mark. He blinked. The spatula in his hand sagged slightly. He turned, confused, calling out to his wife, but her mouth was frozen in the middle of a word, her eyes glassy and unmoving. A beer bottle hovered in his friend's hand, tilted at an impossible angle, the amber liquid inside refusing to fall. The universe around him had become a paused film, and Mark was the only character still playing. Then came the hum. It wasn't a sound that entered his ears, more like a pressure inside his skull, a vibration that seemed to pulse from his bones outward. From the sky, visible only from the vantage point of something far above human perception, a thin, vertical fissure appeared. It opened not like a door but like a slit in a curtain of fabric, parting the night sky with surgical precision. A colorless beam descended, so narrow it looked more like a thread of light than a ray, and wrapped itself around Mark's body like an invisible cage. He couldn't scream. Even fear felt muted, as though someone had placed a velvet barrier between his thoughts and his impulses. His feet left the ground without the slightest shake of resistance. The spatula slipped from his fingers, and in the instant before it hit the frozen grass, before its metal edge made contact with a single unmoving blade, Mark Halley was pulled upward, swallowed effortlessly into the slit. The fissure closed. Time resumed. The spatula hit the ground with a metallic clink that made two people glance toward the grill, confused as to why Mark wasn't standing where he had been a second earlier. Children resumed screaming with joy. A dog completed its jump, barking at a floating bubble. The night returned to life, and not a single person noticed that one of them had vanished. From the heavens, far beyond air, cloud, and sky, in a region of existence humans do not name because they have no framework to conceive of it, Mark drifted weightlessly inside a vast geometry of moving structures. He felt weight, then weightlessness, then nothing. Lights pulsed in patterns that felt like language. Shapes moved with impossible precision, bending in ways matter should not bend. And standing around him, tall and layered and shifting like figures made of folded dimensions, were beings that did not walk or float but unfolded themselves from space itself. They touched him without touching, rearranging memories, peeling open layers of consciousness, scanning everything he had ever believed about the world. He saw his childhood home, his father's face, his first kiss, his first heartbreak, his failures, his resentments, his small triumphs, his hidden fears, his thoughts he had never spoken aloud. Every fragment of his mind was sifted, analyzed, weighed against something unseen. They spoke to him, but not with words. They spoke with feelings, judgment, curiosity, approval, a strange, chilling interest. He felt a question, then an answer, then nothing. When he returned, it was not to his backyard. Mark awakened in the middle of a dusty Arizona road, barefoot, trembling, skin shimmering faintly as if infused with microscopic silver particles. Hours had passed, or seconds, he couldn't tell. His memories came in scattered flashes, tall figures, endless corridors, a sensation of being measured, evaluated, selected. He stumbled into the headlights of a passing car, soaked in sweat, whispering the same sentence over and over. "They're choosing us one by one." And far above, in that silent slit of unbroken night, the ones who took him turned their attention toward the next name on a list no human would ever see. From the height of a divine vantage, Interstate 70 cut across the Colorado landscape like a glowing silver vein, its headlights drifting like tiny fireflies across the vast, empty night. The mountains rose like black silhouettes against a deep navy sky, and the desert plains stretched out in all directions, quiet and indifferent. And barreling down the lonely highway at 1:14 a.m. was Raymond Doyle, a trucker who had spent half his life hauling freight through every forgotten corridor of the American West. His 18-wheeler rumbled steadily forward, its headlights carving a pale tunnel into the darkness. To anyone watching from the ground, this was just another midnight drive. But from above, far above, the universe was already bending around him. The first anomaly began as a vibration beneath his wheels, subtle enough that Raymond blamed it on old pavement. But from a god's perspective, the asphalt itself rippled, just once, like something vast and sleeping had taken a breath beneath the highway's surface. His dashboard lights flickered. His radio sputtered. A warning light blinked through half a dozen systems before stabilizing again. He muttered under his breath, adjusting in his seat, unaware that the empty stretch behind him had just gone completely black. Not night black, absence black. Every car that had once been visible, every pair of headlights, taillights, every approaching vehicle, had vanished from existence in an instant, as if the road had been erased behind him. As Raymond carved through a dead, silent patch of highway, a presence observed him. A presence so large that it cast no shadow because shadows are artifacts of light, and this thing existed outside the rules of illumination. It followed him from a plane of reality humans do not recognize, and the highway responded to it. The road breathed again. Raymond felt the tremor travel through the steering wheel up his arms into his chest. He turned down the radio and leaned forward, peering into the night. The dark ahead of him looked the same as always, empty, endless, but something was wrong with the air. It felt denser, heavier, as if it were thickening into a liquid he was driving through. Then the sky folded. From above, it appeared like the atmosphere itself curled inward, bending around an object that should not exist, a massive structure descending from a dimension that was more geometry than matter. Its edges flickered, not with lights but with shifting layers of perspective, like a shape being rendered in multiple dimensions at once. Raymond never saw it clearly. His truck did. All at once, every system in the cab died. Lights off, engine off, power off. Silence filled the cabin, thick and absolute. His rig coasted silently down the highway, slowing as if it had become weightless. "What the hell?" he whispered, flicking switches that no longer clicked. He opened the door, stepping into an unnaturally still night. From the divine perspective, the moment became a tableau, a single man standing beside a powerless truck on an infinite road, beneath a sky folding itself like origami. The stars vanished above him, swallowed into a widening, silent void that expanded without sound or breeze. Then the highway beneath his feet pulsed, not cracked, not shook, pulsed. He stumbled backward, eyes wide, watching the asphalt rise by a fraction of an inch, breathing outward like a lung expanding. The road exhaled, releasing a warm gust of air that smelled of minerals and dust millions of years old. Raymond ran, but his feet never touched the ground again. A beam, thin as a strand of fishing line yet infinitely stronger, lanced down from the folded sky and caught him mid-stride. His body froze, first his legs, then his torso, then the breath in his lungs. His thoughts scattered like birds struck from the air. and then he drifted upward, pulled into the geometric more above him. From the cosmic view, he became a tiny glowing dot rising into a vast structure, disappearing through a shifting doorway of angles that made no earthly sense. His truck remained on the side of the highway, hazard lights dead, engine silent. Hours later, when authorities found the vehicle, the driver's seat was still warm. But Raymond Doyle was gone, and high above the Rocky Mountains, hidden in a fold of space humans cannot see, something enormous and ancient continued moving along the interstate, searching for the next mind that fit its criteria. From the altitude of a god's gaze, northern Wisconsin looked like an enormous dark quilt of forests stitched together with thin strips of county roads and distant farmhouse lights. Night in this part of America always arrived with a certain heaviness. Thick air, deep silence, and the faint metallic scent of cold that seeped through every wooden wall and window pane. And nestled deep inside those quiet woods stood the Stevens family farmhouse, a structure built in 1912 and repaired 100 times since, perched on a small clearing like a tired sentinel. At 2:13 a.m. the house awoke, not in the human sense, not with creaking boards or groaning pipes, but with intention. Lamps flicked on in the hallway one by one as if someone were walking past them. The baby monitor in the living room crackled to life, emitting static, then quiet murmuring. The oven preheated itself. The kitchen radio tuned into a station that didn't exist. Each action was small, harmless, domestic, but from the godlike perspective looking down on the farmhouse, they looked like signals, rhythmic pulses from an intelligence pushing its fingers through the walls. Inside the master bedroom, Thomas Stevens jerked awake. He stared at the ceiling fan, confused. It wasn't hot. No reason for the oven to be on. No reason for lights to be on. No reason for voices, soft, layered, overlapping, to drift through the house like fog. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Beside him, his wife slept soundly. Even the dog at the foot of the bed didn't stir. Only Thomas seemed capable of hearing the low hum that pressed into his skull like a slow heartbeat. Meanwhile, from a vantage above the house, the event was expanding. Lines, thin, luminous, geometric, began forming around the property, almost like a cage or scanning grid. Something was measuring the house. Something was mapping it. Something was reaching through it. At precisely 2:15 a.m., the walls shifted, not physically, perceptually. For a second, Thomas saw the hallway outside his room stretch, like its length had doubled, then tripled, then collapsed back into its original form. He blinked, confused, thinking he was dreaming, but the hallway stretched again, its far end dissolving into a pulsing blur of light. He stepped into it. The moment his bare foot touched the hallway floorboards, the lights flickered in a synchronized pattern. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, upstairs closet, attic. Each bulb blinked twice, on, off, like Morse code being tapped out by something inside the walls. The baby monitor whispered louder. He leaned in. He heard voices, not one, dozens, whispering, layered over each other like a chorus, some speaking English, some speaking no language he recognized, some speaking in a cadence that felt almost like breathing, and then the voices stopped. The hallway lights died all at once, plunging the house into darkness. From far above, the entire property dimmed, like a single candle being cupped by a giant, unseen hand. Thomas tried the bedroom light switch. Nothing. He tried the hall switch. Nothing. Every system suddenly cut out. Electricity, furnace, even the refrigerator fell silent. The silence was too perfect to be natural. It was engineered, designed. The floorboards under his feet vibrated. A low hum resonated deep inside the walls, like something alive had awakened inside them. He staggered backward, hitting the plaster wall, breathing fast, trying to make sense of the sound. Then the house inhaled. Every door swung inward. Every curtain ballooned. Every cabinet snapped open. Air rushed from every corner of the structure, funneling toward the staircase as if the entire house were taking a single, massive breath. Lights exploded on again. Every lamp, every bulb, every appliance, flooding the rooms with an eerie, blinding white glow. Shadows vanished. For a moment, every inch of the house was illuminated in perfect clarity. In that frozen second, Thomas saw them. Figures. Tall, thin silhouettes standing inside each brightly lit room. One in the kitchen, two in the living room, one at the top of the staircase, three in the children's bedroom. Their outlines were soft, almost out of focus, like they were made of vibrating air instead of flesh. They didn't move. They didn't turn toward him. They simply existed, and then all at once the lights died again. Darkness crashed back like a wave. The house exhaled. A violent gust pushed outward, slamming doors shut, rattling dishes in cabinets, whipping curtains back against windows. The baby monitor shut off with a sharp click. The oven cooled instantly. The radio cut to silence. Everything died, except Thomas. The air around him grew warm. A pressure built behind his eyes. His breath stuttered. He felt something tug at his consciousness, a sensation like being gently pulled forward by a hook attached not to his body but to his mind itself. He collapsed to his knees, gripping the floorboards, trembling as a flood of images poured into his mind. A towering structure hovering above the house, walls tangled with alien circuitry, beings moving through dimensions like curtains, a sensation of being examined, evaluated, categorized, and then it stopped. At 2:16 a.m., the lights in the Stevens farmhouse returned to normal, glowing softly as if nothing had ever happened. The appliances hummed peacefully. The hallway shrank back to its ordinary length. The baby monitor was quiet. The oven beeped an idle notification. Thomas lay on the floor, drenched in sweat. His wife called out from the bedroom, complaining about a strange dream. But Thomas knew he hadn't dreamed. He knew the house had been visited. He knew something had watched him, measured him, compared him to something else. And from the heavens, from a height only gods and watchers could occupy, the scanning grid slowly pulled itself back into the sky, leaving the Stevens family under the illusion of safety for one more night. From the vantage of a divine, unblinking eye hovering over the great American Northwest, the town of Maple Ridge looked like a handful of warm lights scattered across a basin of towering pines. It was the kind of place where nights were so quiet you could hear the wind speak through the branches, and where a single pair of headlights on a rural road felt like an event. And on one particular autumn night, beneath a sky heavy with stars and the smell of damp soil, an 8-year-old boy named Ethan Marrow stood alone in his backyard, clutching a cheap plastic telescope pointed at nothing in particular. It was 9:47 p.m. His parents were inside arguing softly about money. His dog slept on the porch. The world was painfully ordinary, but the sky was not. From above, the dome of stars shimmered with a disturbance no human eye could detect. The slightest warping of the atmosphere, like reality itself, was simmering on low heat. A pattern, geometric, pulsing, intelligent, spread outward in a perfect circle above Maple Ridge, expanding silently like ripples on black water. Ethan noticed it first as a low vibration in his chest. Not a sound, not a hum, a feeling. He stepped back from his telescope, blinking upward. The stars seemed wrong, too bright, too sharp, too organized. They aligned themselves, slowly forming a spiral, one that rotated clockwise with impossible precision. No child, no adult, no scientist on Earth had ever seen the night sky behave like this. Ethan should have been afraid. Instead, he whispered, "Hello." From the god's vantage, that single word shot upward like a tiny spark, acknowledged instantly. The sky opened, not cracked, not parted by clouds, opened. A perfectly round aperture, a hole punched clean through the fabric of night, dilated directly above Ethan's backyard. Stars bent inward toward it, stretching like beads on elastic threads. Colors that had no earthly names flashed inside it, swirling like liquid metal. And from deep within that cosmic wound, something looked down. The wind died. Crickets froze mid-chirp. The world paused, but Ethan did not. He felt a pressure behind his forehead, a warm pulling sensation as though his thoughts were being gently lifted from their hiding places. His memories flickered, birthday candles, cartoons, the moment his grandfather died, the smell of his mother's perfume. Nothing hurt, nothing frightened him. It only felt like someone was flipping through the pages of his mind. Then he heard it. A voice made of many voices coming from everywhere and nowhere, layered like echoes inside an empty cathedral. "We see you." Ethan's breath hitched. His small fingers tightened around the telescope. The voice spoke again, "You are not hidden." And then the yard changed. Light spilled from the aperture, slow, syrup-thick beams that drifted downward like glowing mist. As it touched the grass, the blades shifted color, becoming a saturated green that pulsed like heartbeat rhythm. The wooden fence vibrated softly. The air tasted metallic. Ethan's skin tingled. From the divine vantage above, a column of information, pure data, pure consciousness, descended toward him. It was not light. It was not matter. It was something that belonged to a dimension layered parallel to his own. It enveloped him like a cocoon. His eyes went white. He didn't fall. He didn't shake. He simply listened. Images flooded his mind in a rapid cascade. Planets consumed by fire, oceans boiling under alien suns, civilizations rising and collapsing in cycles older than mankind itself. He saw beings made not of flesh but of angles. He saw a structure hanging above Earth like a spider above a web. He saw maps, star maps, spanning distances so enormous they swallowed entire galaxies. And then his body lifted 3 inches off the ground, weightless, suspended in a sphere of humming light. His mouth opened. Words came out that he did not understand. "Not ready," the light flashed once. And the sky closed, collapsing inward like a camera shutter, erasing itself in a single instant. The stars snapped back into their natural positions. The wind resumed. Crickets chirped. A car passed on a distant road. Ethan fell into the grass. The light vanished. The warmth vanished. The memories stayed. When his parents ran outside after hearing him gasp, they found their son lying on his back, staring silently upward, his pupils wide and unfocused. "Ethan, what happened?" He blinked slowly, lifting a trembling hand toward the stars. "They wanted to see me," he whispered. And in the cosmic darkness above Maple Ridge, something enormous shifted, retreating, waiting, calculating. The event had not been random. The selection had not been accidental. Ethan Marrow had been scanned, measured, marked. And the ones who chose him would return again. From the height of a god's gaze over the American Midwest, St. Augustine Regional Hospital looked like a pale block of light sitting alone in a sea of darkness, its parking lot half empty, its fluorescent windows glowing like tired eyes that never closed. At 3:02 a.m., the town around it slept. Cul-de-sacs dim, traffic lights cycling pointlessly through red and green, gas stations reduced to silent icons under sodium lamps. But inside the hospital, the night was awake the way only human suffering keeps a place awake. Monitors beeping, wheels squeaking down linoleum, coffee machines gurgling in exhausted rhythms. On the 4th floor, in a ward that smelled of disinfectant and old blankets, a nurse named Claire Donovan moved from room to room with a kind of practiced calm that only comes from years of watching people balance between life and death. She was 38, with dark hair pulled into a bun, a small coffee stain on her scrubs, and a pager clipped to her waistband that never seemed to stay quiet. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were not. From the divine vantage point, she was a tiny moving dot of motion in a rational, rectangular maze of hallways and rooms. But tonight, as she walked past room 417, something above her shifted, something that did not belong to the architecture of the building. It was not ductwork, not wiring, not pipe. It was intent. At 3:07 a.m., Claire stopped at the nurse's station, glanced at the clock, and rubbed the bridge of her nose. A patient was restless. Another was refusing medication. A third was slipping away, slow and inevitable. She checked charts, signed off on vitals, and tried not to think about how heavy the air felt tonight, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The first anomaly was small. A light flickered in the ceiling, not the usual fluorescent stutter of a dying bulb, but a slow, pulsing dim that rolled across the corridor like a wave, then back again, then stopped. Her eyes followed the movement automatically. The hallway looked normal. The ceiling tiles looked normal. But from above, from a perspective beyond the concrete and rebar of the hospital's roof, An invisible circle had appeared over the building, as precise as a surgical incision. The air inside that circle was thinner, clearer, shaped by something that did not need wings or engines to hover there. Geometry unfolded, delicate, shifting plates of dark metal that wasn't metal at all, sliding into position around the circle, as if building an enormous iris. Inside room 417, an elderly man named Harold Blake lay asleep, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms. Claire stepped in to check his Roman 4 pump, instinctively glancing up at the ceiling vent above his bed. The air seemed wrong there, thicker, almost shimmering. She frowned, checked his chart, adjusted the blanket, and turned to leave. The vent shifted, not physically, not enough to be seen by an ordinary night shift nurse moving too quickly. But from the God's eye view, the metal vent cover was now the center of an invisible storm, a vortex of microscopic distortions that twisted the space beneath it into a shallow funnel. It looked like the beginning of a drain forming in reality. Claire moved down the hall. The second anomaly came 2 minutes later, more obvious, impossible to dismiss as fatigue. Every monitor on the floor beeped in unison. For exactly 1 second, a single, perfectly synchronized tone filled the hallway as if every machine had received the same invisible command. The sound stopped just as quickly, leaving behind a vacuum of silence. Claire froze. She turned in a slow circle, listening. Then came the hum. It began in her bones, low, almost like the pressure change before a storm, but with no storm, no wind, no thunder. A vibration pulsed through the floor, through the wall, through the air. The fluorescent lights did not flicker this time. They held steady, but their color changed by a fraction of a shade, shifting from sterile white to something slightly cooler, slightly more artificial, like light from another star. She walked back toward 417. From above, the ceiling on the 4th floor had already opened. It did not crack apart or explode. Instead, a circular section of the hospital's interior simply fell away from the larger body of reality. Inside that circle, there were no pipes, no wires, no insulation. There was only a calm, depthless darkness that led upward to a space that did not match any human concept of up. Within that darkness, structures moved, silent and huge, like mechanical organs inside a living machine. As Claire approached 417, she saw it. The ceiling over Harold Blake's bed breathing. The tiles bulged outward, then flattened, then bulged again, as if someone were exhaling slowly through the plaster. The pattern synced perfectly with the old man's failing breaths. Inhale, ceiling swelled. Exhale, ceiling sank. Her chest tightened. "Okay, that's not possible," she whispered. She stepped into the room. Everything stopped. Harold's breath paused mid-inhale. The heart monitor froze on a single line. The Roman 4 drip suspended in midair, droplets caught halfway down the tube, trembling but refusing to fall. Claire was the only thing in motion. From the height of a patient, room simply looked wrong. From the height of a god, it looked invaded. The dark circle above the bed widened, swallowing the ceiling tiles. The vent, the fluorescent lights, the sprinkler head, everything vanished into that expanding aperture. In their place appeared an opening that was not a hole but a window to somewhere else, somewhere that glowed faintly with a dim, cold light. Claire's breath turned shallow. "What is this?" she whispered, but the sound didn't go anywhere. It didn't bounce off the walls. It didn't echo. It just died in the air between her lips and the bed. Something descended. Not a figure, not in the way humans understand bodies. It was a shape made of angles that never stayed the same, edges folding in on themselves, surfaces appearing and disappearing like a constantly recalculating drawing. The form shimmered with faint colors, not bright enough to be vivid, but enough to make her eyes water. It hovered over Harold, and it began to read him. Claire could feel it, not just see it, feel it. A pressure pushed down on the room, compressing the air, flattening time into something slow and syrupy. Harold's life flickered above his body like a projection only the thing could see. His childhood, his years in the army, his first love, the guilt he carried for things no one else knew. Each memory appeared around the bed as a translucent echo, then folded into the angular shape as if being absorbed, catalogued, weighed. The being ignored her. To it, she was just background. Claire stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached out, not to touch it but to test how close she could get before something stopped her. Her palm hovered inches from the strange geometry. The air burned, not with heat but with information. Her skin tingled with a flood of impressions, images, numbers, strange symbols that weren't letters but held meaning anyway. For a fraction of a second, her mind opened like a door kicked wide, and something poured through. She saw a map of Earth covered in tiny points of light. She saw hospitals, homes, highways, school gyms, parking lots. At each location she saw a tall shape hovering, reading, analyzing. She saw people lifted from beds, from cars, from crowded rooms, examined and put back, sometimes not in the same place, sometimes never. A voice, not sound but intent, pressed into her, not suitable, not compatible, not selected. The voice was not referring to Harold. It was referring to her. The shape shifted. For the first time it turned toward Claire. Her heart rattled in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of the room, to hide, to do anything but stand there under the gaze of something that had never been human and never would be. She couldn't move. The being extended a smaller plane of itself toward her, like a limb unfolding. It hovered inches from her face. She felt her thoughts scatter, her fears, her regrets, the small secret she carried about wishing she had left this town years ago. All of it passed through the contact point and into whatever served them as understanding. Time stretched. Then, just as quickly, it released her. The plane retracted. The being rotated slightly as though refocusing on Harold. Its judgment had been made, not selected. The darkness above the bed brightened for a moment, then swallowed the thing completely as it retracted through the aperture. Harold's memories, which had swirled like ghostly fragments around the bed, snapped back inside his body as though yanked by an invisible string. The ceiling reassembled. Tiles returned, vent reappeared, light fixtures blinked into place. The room's architecture rewound itself into its original, boring configuration. The aperture sealed, leaving behind nothing but a faint ringing in Claire's ears. Time resumed. The heart monitor beeped. The Roman IV drip continued. Harold exhaled with a rattling, shallow sound. Claire staggered backward, gasping, clutching her chest. No alarm sounded. No code blue was called. No one rushed in. From their perspective, nothing had happened. She stood alone in room 417, eyes wide, scrubs damp with sweat, staring at a perfectly normal acoustic ceiling as if it might peel back again at any second. Harold's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her with an odd, tranquil clarity he hadn't had in days. "They were here," he whispered. Her throat tightened. You saw them too." His gaze drifted upward to the ceiling. "They said I wasn't theirs," he murmured. "Not yet." His eyes closed again. From the god's vantage above St. Augustine Regional, the circle over the hospital retracted, folding itself into the dark hull of an invisible structure that drifted higher, sliding seamlessly out of Earth's atmosphere. Inside, data streamed, compatibility indices, neurological patterns, emotional profiles. Names, dates, coordinates. Claire Donovan's name glowed briefly on one of their incomprehensible displays, highlighted then dimmed. Not selected, too aware, too soon. The ship turned its attention toward another cluster of lights on the continent below. Another town, another building, another unsuspecting human chosen from a list no one on Earth would ever read. And far below, in a quiet ward of a Midwestern hospital, a nurse stared at a blank patch of ceiling and understood, with the heavy certainty of someone who had seen behind the curtain, that her world was no longer the simple, solid place she had believed it to be. It was a hunting ground, and the hunters had only just begun. From the height of a divine vantage above the northern Cascades, the American wilderness looked infinite, an ocean of towering pines rolling like dark waves across the mountains, broken only by the occasional glimmer of a lake or the thin white scars of dirt roads. Humans in this vast canvas were tiny intruders. Their campfires flickered like fragile sparks trying to hold back the weight of the forest's ancient silence. One of those sparks belonged to Daniel Carter, a 31-year-old construction worker who had come into the woods alone seeking peace after a brutal breakup. His campsite, just a tent, a folding chair, and a cheap lantern, sat beside a quiet stream in a clearing untouched by anything except wind, moss, and time. At 11:46 p.m., Daniel sat with a tin mug of instant coffee, listening to the steady hiss of the forest and trying to convince himself he wasn't as lonely as he felt. From above, nothing about this moment was unusual, but from much, much higher, far beyond the faint sheen of Earth's atmosphere, something ancient and metallic drifted into alignment with his coordinates. The forest reacted first. At 11:49 p.m. the wind stopped. Not slowed, not calmed. Stopped. Every pine needle froze in place, suspended like green knives pointing at nothing. The stream beside Daniel went perfectly flat, the surface becoming a flawless mirror reflecting a moon that suddenly felt too large. Even the insects, always buzzing, always moving, fell silent mid-flight. Daniel frowned, looking up from his mug. "Hello," he muttered nervously, though he had no idea who he thought might answer. A second later, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. His breath fogged. The lantern flickered. The hairs on his arms lifted. His ears popped from a pressure change so sudden it made him gag. From the divine perspective, the trees around Daniel began to bow outward, trunks bending not from wind but from an unseen gravitational distortion settling into the center of the clearing. Leaves shimmered with a faint, bluish phosphorescence. Sap froze inside bark. Moss curled like a dying creature. Then the forest split. A line appeared down the center of the clearing, at first only an inch wide, then widening, 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 like an invisible blade slicing the world open along a seam that had always been there but never noticed. Daniel stumbled to his feet, backing away as the ground beneath him trembled. The split reached 6 feet, then 10, then 20. It didn't reveal dirt or roots or stone. It revealed darkness, not blackness. Darkness, dense, opaque, perfectly uniform, as if behind the forest was a second canvas painted with pure void. And something moved inside it. Daniel whispered, "No, no, no, no." A light flickered deep within the void, faint at first, then growing pale, silver, and impossibly distant, yet approaching without movement, like a star drifting through liquid. Then another light appeared beside it, and another, and another. They arranged themselves in a pattern so precise it screamed intelligence. Daniel dropped to his knees. "Please, I'm not supposed to see this." The lights answered. A low tone vibrated through the clearing, passing not through the air but through the bones of every living thing in miles. Deer collapsed in the forest. Birds dropped silently from branches. Trout went limp in the stream. Trees seemed to exhale mist. Daniel grabbed his head and screamed as the vibration pressed into his skull, unfolding thoughts he had never spoken aloud, memories he had buried, fears he had hidden. It wasn't reading his mind. It was filtering him, sorting him, selecting him. The void pulsed. A single beam, thin, needle-like, shot from the darkness and hit Daniel square in the chest. He convulsed backward, floating several inches above the ground, arms spread, eyes rolled back. His breath stuttered in short, sharp bursts as the beam drilled through layers of his mind, scanning for compatibility, potential, some unknown trait the being sought. Then abruptly the convulsion ceased. Daniel hovered motionless. From above, the beam changed color, shifting from silver to faint gold. Candidate found. Potential acceptable. The void expanded outward, becoming a circular portal that rippled like disturbed water. Through the opening, faint silhouettes appeared, tall, thin, shimmering like heat-distorted metal. They did not step forward. They did not walk. They folded. Their bodies rearranged through dimensional seams, slipping from one layer of space to another, until 4 of them stood in the clearing around Daniel, angular limbs floating inches above the moss. One reached toward him. Its hand, if it was a hand, was a cluster of overlapping planes that rotated silently, reflecting starlight in impossible angles. It touched Daniel's forehead with the faintest tap. His consciousness detonated. Not physically, no explosion, no gore, but inwardly. He saw stars collapsing, galaxies colliding, civilizations rising and falling like sparks floating upward and dying in the wind. He saw Earth from orbits no human technology had ever reached. He saw tunnels in space that bent light itself like wet clay. He saw beings moving through corridors outside time, and he understood nothing of it. Not yet. The being withdrew its hand. Daniel dropped onto the moss with a heavy thud, coughing, eyes streaming. The figures retreated toward the void. The portal shrank, folding in on itself like a black flower closing for the night. The final message pressed into Daniel's mind as the forest stitched itself back together: "We will return when you are ready." The void closed. The split in the forest vanished. The wind resumed. Fish swam. Insects buzzed. The clearing became ordinary again. Daniel lay on the ground for nearly an hour, trembling uncontrollably. When he finally stood, his vision had changed, expanded, sharpened, as if the world had gained an extra layer only he could see. He whispered into the cold, empty night, "They're training me for something." Above the Cascades, invisible to satellites and radar, a structure the size of a mountain rotated slowly once, its dark hull reflecting no light, before vanishing into a fold of space. It had found its candidate, and its work had only begun. From the height of a god's gaze above the Ohio night, the Northfield Corporate Park looked like a neat cluster of white rectangles and glass boxes, arranged with the careful sterility of a spreadsheet. Office buildings slept in orderly rows, their windows dark except for a few scattered floors where overworked employees still tapped at keyboards. Parking lots sat mostly empty, lit by tall poles that cast pale circles onto asphalt. From up here, it was all geometry and silence. On the ground, inside Building C, it was just another boring night shift for Marcus Hale. He sat in the security office, feet propped on the desk, a lukewarm coffee cooling beside his elbow. The room was a narrow box filled with humming equipment. A bank of 12 security monitors stacked in 3 rows of 4, 2 aging desktop towers under the desk, a wall panel of switches that controlled lights, doors, alarms. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt dust from the computer fans. It was 2:21 a.m. On most nights, Marcus did nothing but flick his eyes from camera to camera and count the hours until sunrise. From the divine vantage above the parking lots and rooftops, his little room glowed like a single pixel in an enormous grid. He had no idea that tonight, the grid was going to answer something that was not human. On screen 3A, the lobby sat empty, just a row of chairs and a potted plant. On 2B, the loading dock's overhead lamps buzzed quietly over an abandoned forklift. On 1D, the glass entry doors reflected the faint pattern of interior lights. Marcus scratched his chin, took a sip of cold coffee, grimaced, and checked his phone. No new notifications, no text from his ex, no emergency calls, just silence. Then camera 4C blinked, just once. He frowned, leaning forward. 4C covered the rooftop of Building C, a flat expanse of tar and gravel with a pair of ventilation units and an access door. It rarely showed anything but stillness and weather. The feed went black for a split second, then popped back on. Rooftop, vent units, nothing. Marcus snorted to himself. "Cheap cables," he muttered, tapping the side of the monitor. From above, the first change was subtle but vast. A thin, circular distortion appeared over the corporate park, a faint shimmer in the air that no human eye could see. The circle grew, encompassing all 4 office buildings, both parking lots and the security shack at the gate. Within that perimeter, the electromagnetic environment shifted, microscopic changes to fields and frequencies, like the air itself had become a lens. The cameras were the first to feel it. Monitor 2C flickered, then 1B, then 3D. The glitches weren't random. They moved in sequence, like lights turning on in a pattern. Left to right, top to bottom, then back again. The feeds blinked across all 12 monitors, one by one, all within a time frame so precise it might as well have been measured by a surgical instrument. Marcus sat up straight now. "Okay, that's weird." The monitors stabilized. Every feed returned to normal. But from the God's eye view above the complex, something new had appeared on each camera, something that did not belong to the optics or hardware at all. A thin, invisible layer of foreign code wrapped itself around every lens, every data stream, every signal wire. The building's security system, once a closed loop under human control, had been joined, watched, hijacked. Marcus exhaled, trying to shake off the surge of adrenaline. Night shifts did that sometimes. Small things felt bigger when you were alone, with nothing but the hum of electronics for company. He glanced at the digital clock on the wall. 2:24 a.m. Camera 1A changed, not in a way he could name at first. It showed the main parking lot with its faded parking lines and a handful of scattered cars. But something about the angles looked wrong, like the perspective had shifted by a few degrees without the camera actually moving. The distance between the light pole and the nearest car seemed slightly off. The lines of the asphalt felt unnaturally straight, the reflections too crisp. He leaned forward, squinting. A voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was just tired. Camera 2D changed next. It showed the rear corridor between buildings B and C, a long hallway of glass doors and concrete planters. For a moment, the image stuttered and the corridor stretched, literally stretched, as if someone had grabbed the far end of the hallway and pulled it like taffy. The doors looked farther away, the planters elongated. The floor tiles became long, distorted rectangles. Then, in a blink, everything snapped back to normal. Marcus yanked his feet off the desk. Okay, hell no, nope. From above, the invisible circle over the complex brightened. A structure drifted into alignment overhead, so vast the buildings beneath it looked like toy blocks on a child's floor. Its surface wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was some fluid geometry that reconfigured itself silently, swallowing starlight without reflection. Panels opened on its underside, revealing rings within rings of dim, cold light. It had not come to the corporate park by accident. It had come because it wanted a better look. At 2:26 a.m., all 12 monitors switched to static. Every feed died at the exact same moment. No gradual glitch, no flicker, just a full, simultaneous blackout. Ah, come on, Marcus barked, slamming his palm on the desk. He picked up the radio. Control to IT, I'm losing all feeds in C. But there was no IT, not at this hour. Just a voicemail line and an overworked technician asleep miles away. Static hissed across the speakers, then softened. The screens cleared. The cameras came back. Only now they weren't showing the building anymore. Every monitor displayed the same thing, the security room itself. The angle was slightly higher and wider than any camera he knew they had, looking down over his shoulders, capturing him, the desk, the bank of monitors, the doorway behind him, the clock on the wall. Marcus froze. He knew instantly this angle didn't exist in the building's system. There was no camera behind him, no camera in the ceiling above his head. Yet there he was, captured from above like a character in a video game. He slowly turned around. The wall behind him was blank, just peeling paint and an old fire evacuation map. No camera, no new installation, nothing. He looked back at the monitors. The me that is above the complex saw the moment his perception cracked, like a pane of glass under sudden pressure. The building's internal network no longer belonged to humans alone. The facility's nervous system had been plugged into something bigger, something watching from above, from outside, from a vantage where his tiny room was simply one node in a much larger experiment. On the screens, the perspective shifted. The view pulled back, moving away from him in a smooth, unnatural glide, as if the camera was drifting through the air, back toward the ceiling corner, then through the wall, then into the hallway beyond. The feed was no longer bound by the locations of any physical cameras. It was flying. Okay, Marcus whispered, voice shaking. This isn't possible. He watched as the view floated down the hallway outside his office, passed through a closed door without resistance, and entered the lobby. Chairs, vending machines, a fake fern. Everything was there, rendered with hyperreal clarity. The building was being explored by something that didn't need doors. From above, the structure hovering over the complex extended filaments, narrow beams of invisible energy that sank through the roof like fingers through water. Each filament connected to a camera, a cable, a processor, turning the system into a sensory organ. The building became an eye. The monitors became a pupil. At 2:28 a.m., one of the feeds broke away from the others. Screen 3B flickered, then showed a different angle of the lobby than the rest, lower, closer, as if someone was standing on the floor looking toward the elevators. A voice leaked out of the speakers. Not words, not language, just a low, modulated tone that rose and fell in sync with the shifting image on screen. Marcus' skin prickled. "Who's there?" he demanded, heart pounding. The tone rose in pitch for a second, then flattened out. The camera began to move again, gliding toward the elevator doors. On screen, the elevator panel lit up. The down arrow blinked. He stared at the real elevator status panel on the wall of his office. Every light was off. No cars in motion. No calls placed. According to the system, the elevators were idle. On the monitor, the doors slid open. The car was empty. "Stop," Marcus whispered. "Just stop." The camera floated inside. From the god's perspective, the elevator shaft had become a vertical tunnel of warped space, a line drawn through the building, connecting floors not just physically but informationally. The visitors didn't need the elevator. They liked it. They were using it as a spine. On the monitor, the elevator doors closed. The indicator showed 4. The car began to rise. In reality, no motors engaged. No cables moved. The elevator didn't budge. But on screen, the car arrived at the 4th floor. The doors slid open into a dark hallway lined with glass offices and cubicles. Marcus' breath came in short bursts now. Sweat gathered beneath his collar. He tried to stand up. He couldn't. His legs refused to respond, as if his body belonged to gravity and fear and the chair. But not to him. His hands were free. His eyes moved. His heart crashed against his ribs like a trapped animal. But the simple command to stand went nowhere. From above, another filament descended from the structure, thinner and more focused, aiming directly at the security office. It brushed through the roof, through the concrete, through the plaster ceiling, and anchored itself invisibly to the back of Marcus' neck. They were done using the cameras to look at the building. Now they were using his nervous system. The view on the monitor changed again. 4th floor corridor, then through another wall into a conference room. A long table, swivel chairs, a whiteboard covered with dry erase scribbles, a projector mounted to the ceiling. And sitting in one of the chairs, facing away from the door, was someone. Marcus squinted. "Who is that?" he whispered. The camera angle circled gracefully around the table, moving toward the seated figure. The person's shape was broad-shouldered, wearing a security uniform. Hands folded on the table. As the feed completed its arc, the figure turned. It was Marcus. Same uniform, same badge, same tired eyes, same coffee stain on his shirt. He lifted his head on screen and stared straight into the lens with a hollow, distant expression. The real Marcus in the security office tried to scream. Nothing came out. The phantom version of him on screen opened his mouth and spoke. The voice that emerged was wrong, deeper, layered. Not one voice, but many, overlapping in a barely controlled chorus. "Conduit located," it said. The speakers carried the sound into the room like a cold wind. The filament in Marcus' neck pulsed. His thoughts shattered into 1,000 pieces. He saw the building from every camera at once. He saw the parking lot from a height of 60 feet. He saw the roof, the stairwells, the lobby, the boiler room. He saw himself from above, a small figure locked in a chair in a cramped, fluorescent room. He saw the structure hovering over Northfield Corporate Park, its underside a shifting complexity of shapes beyond human design. And then he saw beyond that. He saw other structures, other parks, other towns, other grids. He saw the planet as a network of nodes, each one tagged, monitored, occasionally harvested. He realized the cameras had not attracted them. They had simply made their work easier. Data surged through him. He felt his memories open like files being scanned. Childhood in a cramped apartment, fights with his father. The night he almost died in a car accident. the constant low-grade fear of never quite being enough. The chorus voice pressed a conclusion into his mind: compatible, limited, suitable for first-level test. The version of him on the screen stood up from the conference chair. On every monitor, the camera feeds merged into one, a single point of view walking down the fourth-floor hallway toward the nearest window. The phantom Marcus approached the glass. Outside, hovering in the sky where no human eye could see it, something vast and dark loomed, its outline barely visible against the stars. The image moved closer and closer to the glass, as if the phantom was about to walk straight through. Then, all at once, the screens went black. The filament in Marcus' neck snapped. Sound rushed back into the room, the hum of the computers, the faint buzz of old electronics, the distant whir of the HVAC system. Marcus gasped, his body lurching forward, finally obeying his desperate command to move. He shoved his chair back, stumbling to his feet, knocking over his coffee. All 12 monitors reverted to their normal feeds. Parking lot, lobby, hallways, rooftop, still, empty, ordinary. His radio crackled on the desk. "Control, this is Gate 1. A bored voice said, "You messing with the cameras, getting some static down here." Marcus stared at the bank of screens, his heart still hammering, his skin clammy. He picked up the radio with a shaking hand. "Negative, Gate 1, he managed. Must be a glitch in the system." From the height of a god's gaze above Northfield Corporate Park, the circle around the complex shrank until it was invisible. The vast structure overhead slipped sideways into a fold of space, vanishing without acceleration, without thrust, without sound. Inside it, streams of information updated. Marcus Hale tagged. Visual systems, successful interface. Species, adaptable, high sensory potential. Status, under observation. Back in the security office, Marcus sank slowly back into his chair, staring at his own reflection faintly superimposed over the CCTV images. He knew, in the deep animal part of his brain that never lied, that the building had been used, that his cameras had not just watched tonight, they had allowed something else to see. And he also knew this: whatever had looked through them could do it again, whenever it wanted, wherever there were eyes wired to the dark. From the height of a god's gaze over the American Southwest, the desert at 4:12 a.m. looked like an endless black ocean of sand and stone, broken only by the faint, lonely glow of isolated trailer homes, the amber dots of truck stops, and the distant hum of interstate highways stretching toward nowhere. Coyotes prowled among yucca shrubs. Heat still lingered in the rocks from the day before. The stars hung low and sharp, like a ceiling of needles over a land built for silence. On the far edge of a forgotten Arizona town called Bitter Ridge, a single trailer sat beside a gravel road, its porch light flickering with the tired pulse of failing wiring. Inside the trailer, Amelia Rowan slept restlessly on a sun-faded couch, still half-dressed from her late shift at the diner. A box fan rattled at her feet. Her cat slept curled on her stomach. The TV played static. Nothing about her life was remarkable. From above, she was just one more fragile human flicker lost in the vastness of night. But something in the sky had noticed her. It had been watching her for weeks, and tonight it made its move. At exactly 4:14 a.m., the desert wind stopped. Every sound died: the bugs, the distant traffic, the hum of the fan. The air inside the trailer thickened, compressing as though the atmosphere itself had been pulled inward to a single point. Amelia's cat woke first. Its ears flattened, its fur bristled. Then the lights inside the trailer blinked. Once, twice, 3 times, each blink brighter than the last. Amelia stirred, rubbing her eyes, groaning. "Damn power grid." The fan stopped. The TV cut to black. Every bulb in the trailer snapped off. Pitch darkness swallowed the room. Amelia sat up halfway, disoriented. "Hello, power out." But the darkness didn't feel like darkness. It felt like a presence. From a divine vantage above the land, a circular distortion formed over the trailer. The same precision-engineered aperture that had appeared in other stories, but larger now, more complex. Its edges lined with bands of invisible machinery rotating silently like the iris of an eye adjusting for focus. It expanded until it covered the entire property, glowing with a faint, cold luminescence only visible from an altitude of thousands of feet. Inside the trailer, Amelia froze. A soft metallic chime rang through the air, 3 notes, ascending, precise, alien. Then the ceiling began to fade. Not crack, not melt. Fade. It turned translucent, revealing not the sky above, but a shifting geometry of dark, angular shapes sliding over one another like plates of a colossal machine. Through the translucent ceiling, faint symbols pulsed, soft blue glyphs that rearranged themselves like living creatures. Amelia whispered, This is a dream." She stood from the couch. The floor disappeared. One moment her feet were on the fake hardwood laminate. The next she stood on nothing, a platform of invisible force holding her upright as her trailer dissolved around her like sand scattered by a breeze. From above, her entire home flickered like a hologram being peeled apart layer by layer. The desert was gone. The night sky was gone. Amelia was suspended in a vertical shaft of light. Gravity rearranged itself. Her stomach lurched. Her ears popped. A ringing filled her head. She reached for something, anything, to hold onto, but the only thing beneath her was the faint shimmer of a floor made of folded dimensions. Then the ascent began. She rose upward, not physically, not with motion, but with a sudden displacement that erased the distance between where she was and where they wanted her to be. She appeared inside the chamber. The chamber was enormous, a cathedral of moving angles, impossible heights, and shifting geometry that recalibrated itself every few seconds, the walls rippling with strange energy. The air hummed. Lights pulsed. Structures moved like breathing metal. Amelia fell to her knees. Shapes unfolded from the walls, 4 figures emerging in silent precision like origami unfolding itself into tall, slender beings whose forms defied depth perception. They were made of planes and seams, not flesh or bone. They flickered as if they existed only partially in her world. One approached her. It extended a limb. A single point of contact touched her forehead, and her entire life detonated inside her skull. Suddenly she saw herself from above, standing, kneeling, sleeping, working, seen from a god's vantage she never asked for. Then she saw herself from angles not possible in 3-dimensional space, her life as a timeline stretched, compressed, compared. Memories rearranged themselves in reverse. Her childhood rewound. Her teenage years inverted. Faces blurred, unblurred, changed. A second version of herself appeared beside her, then a third. Then a fourth, all identical, all slightly different, all branching possibilities of choices she had once considered. She screamed. Her voice echoed strangely, not in the chamber but in other chambers, other timelines, other probabilities. The beings analyzed every version of her simultaneously. They looked inside her mind in 4 universes at once, locating a single point. The moment her consciousness diverged into something they considered statistically significant, a moment she didn't even remember, a moment they had been tracking for years, one being bent closer. Its voice pressed into her mind, a layered chorus that was both whisper and thunder. "You are the one who shifted." Amelia clutched her head. What did I do? The chamber dimmed. A projection formed in front of her, a web of timelines, glowing strands representing infinite versions of her life. Most remained dim, brittle, unremarkable paths, but one thread glowed violently bright. Humming, alive, that thread was her, the version of her that existed now. The being continued. You moved when no human should have moved. You changed when no human should have changed. You drifted outside your line. Her breath trembled. "I don't understand," the being showed her. A memory, a moment she had forgotten, age 17, an intersection, a red light. A second before a fatal crash was supposed to kill her. She turned her head early. She stepped backward. She avoided the impact, not by instinct, not by chance, but by responding to something she was not supposed to perceive, an event 1 millisecond out of phase with her reality, a ripple, a shift, a glitch. Amelia watched the memory in horror. That's it, that's what you're here for, a step, a stupid little step. The being responded with calm, calculated finality. Yes, your species should not detect the shift, but you did. You moved between moments. You saw US. Her heart stopped cold. She whispered. I didn't see anything, but she had. The memory she never remembered was shown again, a flicker beside her car, the faintest silhouette, a shimmer of motion where no motion should be, a tall shape watching her milliseconds before the crash. She had turned toward it. She had responded to something outside human perception. The being's final message pressed into her like a blade. You exist in the wrong thread. We are here to correct this. She screamed. The chamber collapsed around her. Her timeline web shattered. Her memories bent like liquid metal. Her consciousness spiraled as everything rewound, and then she woke up on her couch in her trailer at 4:15 a.m. The TV was static. The fan rattled. The cat slept on her stomach. But the world felt wrong. A cup that was supposed to be on the table was now on the floor. A photo on the wall showed a version of her with slightly different hair. The cat's fur pattern was subtly altered. The blanket had stripes when it used to have squares. Her phone buzzed. A text from a man she had never met. A message thread full of conversations she had never had. From above, in the godlike view, the desert shimmered faintly, as if reality had been stitched together hastily after being torn open. Amelia sat up slowly, eyes wide, whispering, "This isn't the same world," because she wasn't supposed to stay in her old one. And the beings who corrected her timeline had placed her into the closest match they could find. They had returned her, but not exactly. And far above the desert, the watchers updated their records. Amelia Rowan corrected. Contamination removed. Observe for further anomalies. The night went silent again. The desert exhaled, and the universe continued pretending everything was normal. From the height of a god's gaze above central Nevada, the desert night looked like a vast sheet of black velvet pinned down by distant mountain ranges and stitched with thin silver roads. Nothing moved out here except wind and old dust. Radio towers blinked red over empty plains. Abandoned mines dotted the land like scars from another century. This was a place America had forgotten on purpose, quiet, desolate, and empty enough for secrets to hide without ever being discovered. But tonight, something ancient was awake beneath the desert, and a man named Colton Briggs was about to stumble into it. He was 52 years old, sunburned, worn out, and working the night shift at the Lone Star lithium pit, a half-dead mining site kept alive by a skeleton crew and the fumes of old federal subsidies. His job was simple: patrol the outer shafts with a flashlight, check for rockfalls, make sure the generators didn't die, and try not to think about how his knees hurt in the cold. It was 1:33 a.m. Colton clicked his flashlight on and stepped into the east tunnel, a long, narrow vein carved decades ago and mostly abandoned now. Dust drifted in the beam of his flashlight. The air smelled like damp limestone and rusting machinery. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. But the tunnel, from a god's vantage, was already wrong. It was darker than it should have been, heavier, as if the earth around it was holding its breath. Colton walked deeper. At the halfway mark, his boot hit something that should not have been there. A crack, a new one, fresh, clean-edged, longer than any natural fracture. He crouched, running his fingers along the break. Damn cave-in, that's all I needed, but the crack wasn't part of the rock. It was part of something under the rock. He tapped it with his flashlight. Clink. Metal, not steel, not aluminum. Something colder, denser. Something that gave off a faint vibration when touched, like it was humming far below the range of human hearing. Colton swallowed hard. What the hell is this? He leaned closer. The metal shifted. Not physically, there was no movement. But its surface shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. The lines of the metal rearranged, forming symbols he couldn't read but somehow recognized in the back of his mind, like memories from a dream he didn't remember having. From above the desert, a circular distortion appeared, so faint it barely existed, like someone had pressed a transparent lens against the sky. The distortion spread, cutting a perfect hole in the night just 1,000 feet above the Lone Star pit. The watchers had arrived. Colton didn't know any of this. He only knew the ground trembled beneath him. A low rumble, a pulse. Then a pop, quiet but unmistakable. The crack widened, dust fell, pebbles bounced. A long section of the floor collapsed with a sudden violent snap. Colton fell with it. He tumbled 6 feet, landing on his shoulder with a grunt, coughing through dust. His flashlight clattered beside him, flickering weakly. Damn it, he reached for the flashlight, lifted it, and froze. The beam illuminated a staircase, cut into the earth, perfectly straight, perfectly smooth, descending at a steep angle into a depth of absolute darkness. No mind map had ever shown this. No crew before him had ever found it. The staircase was impossibly clean, carved not by human hands but by something that understood geometry in a way Earth never taught. Colton trembled. "Hey, hello, anyone down here?" His voice echoed far too far. He lifted his flashlight and took a single step down the stairs. The air changed immediately, no longer dusty, no longer dry. It felt thicker, humid, almost metallic. His skin prickled. His heartbeat slowed, thudding in his chest like something was pressing gently against it. From above, the watchers tightened their focus. A beam extended downward, thin, invisible, precise, reaching through the desert soil, sliding along the staircase walls, tracing their shape. Their target was moving. Their test subject was entering the structure prematurely. At the 9th step, Colton heard something. A whisper. Not air, not wind, not rock shifting. A voice, spoken too close to his ear. "Keep going." He spun around, nearly falling backward. Nope, who's there? Silence. He lifted the flashlight again. A faint glow appeared at the bottom of the stairs, soft, turquoise, pulsing like the heartbeat of something vast and buried. He was trembling now, but he kept going. The staircase pulled him. The light guided him. It felt less like he was choosing to descend and more like something had written his steps long before he arrived. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a circular chamber. The ceiling was low. The walls were smooth. Symbols crawled across them like liquid neon. In the center of the room stood a tall, narrow structure, shaped like a pillar but hollow, its interior swirling with a mist that shimmered as if lit from within by a tiny artificial sun. Colton whispered, "What are you?" The pillar answered, not with words, with a sound. A resonant tone, deep, smooth, vibrating through his bones, vibrating through the floor, vibrating through the walls, vibrating through the desert above. It rearranged the air, the dust, the space inside his lungs. His flashlight shut off. Turquoise light filled the chamber. Then the pillar opened. A seam split down its center, releasing a burst of swirling mist and cold air. Something stepped forward, tall, angular, its limbs bending the wrong way, its head elongated and featureless except for 3 glowing lines where its face should be. Colton staggered back. The being raised one hand. Colton couldn't move. The room dimmed. The being's voice pressed into him, layered, harmonic, impossible. "This world is not ready, but you are." Colton choked. "What does that mean?" The being approached. Symbols on the walls flared. The turquoise light condensed into a narrow beam, enveloping him, scanning everything. His memories, his failures, his guilt, his dreams he had long abandoned. He saw the beam's impressions, images flickering across the surface of the being's body. His childhood, his father's death, his failed marriage, the night he almost drank himself into oblivion. The being paused, then spoke again. "You are adaptable, you are selected." Colton screamed. The chamber exploded in light. From above the desert, the watchers recorded the signature, another human matched, another data point logged. The circular distortion over the mind pulsed once, then receded into the sky like a bubble bursting underwater. Inside the chamber, Colton collapsed, but he was not the same man who walked in. His vision burned with afterimages he couldn't describe. His mind buzzed with symbols he couldn't read yet somehow understood. His fingertips tingled. His pulse changed tempo, syncing with a rhythm far older than the desert. He crawled back up the staircase, gasping, stumbling out into the mind tunnel just as the ceiling sealed itself behind him, stone knitting back into place, hiding the staircase forever. From the world's perspective, nothing had happened, but Colton knew. Something had awakened him, marked him, claimed him. And as he staggered out into the night, trembling under the vast Nevada sky, he whispered to the empty desert, "They are beneath us, and waiting." From the height of a god's gaze above the Appalachian corridor, the midnight train slicing through West Virginia looked like a glowing ember drifting across an ocean of mountains. The rails curved through valleys like silver veins. The towns below slept in scattered clusters of porch lights and dim windows. Fog hung low, clinging to the treetops like a living thing. The world was quiet, ancient, and unaware that something unnatural was descending toward it, silent as frost, deliberate as mathematics. On board the 1245 eastbound line, conductor Elias Monroe walked the aisle with his clipboard, checking tickets under the soft, amber glow of the overhead lamps. Elias was a straightforward man, 58 years old, clean mustache, thick glasses, hands scarred from decades of mechanical work. He loved trains, loved the rhythm of the tracks, loved the steady hum of motion and the way the world blurred into a single long ribbon outside the windows. At 1:03 a.m., the train entered Ridgeway Tunnel, the longest stretch of darkness on the route. Elias nodded to passengers dozing in their seats. A young couple curled together beneath a blanket, a businessman asleep over a half-finished spreadsheet, an elderly woman knitting with mechanical precision. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous, just another night shift. From above, however, a circular distortion appeared directly over the tunnel's center, an aperture forming in the air like a crack in the fabric of the sky. Machines of impossible origin hovered in complete silence, opening their inner rings, aligning themselves with precise astronomical timing. The tunnel lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Elias frowned. "Not this again," he tapped the wall, listening to the echo. The train slowed, but not because the engineer touched the brakes. The tracks screamed with unheard vibration, microscopic distortions that only the watchers above understood. The tunnel walls shivered. Fog seeped through tiny cracks like breath escaping a sleeping creature. The train's electrical system died. Every bulb, every dashboard display, every digital screen all at once. And yet the train did not stop, it simply drifted in perfect darkness. Passengers stirred, confused. A woman whispered, "Is this a power outage?" A man demanded, "Why aren't the emergency lights on?" A toddler cried softly into his mother's shoulder. Elias raised his voice. "Everybody stay calm, stay in your seats." He didn't finish, because the air changed. It thickened, bending the sound around him, muffling every noise. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Elias' breath fogged, his skin prickled. Someone gasped. "Look at the windows." The inky darkness outside began to glow, not brightly, not naturally. Lines appeared, thin, geometric lines, illuminating the tunnel walls in a pulsing turquoise grid, as if an invisible architect were scanning every atom of stone around them. The grid expanded, growing wider, brighter, stretching upward beyond what the tunnel could contain. Passengers stared in paralyzed silence. A child whispered, "Mom, the walls are moving." They were. From the godlike vantage above, the watchers extended filaments downward, microscopic tendrils of scanning light that slipped through the tunnel walls and into the train like ghostly fingers. They touched metal, fabric, luggage, skin, every passenger. Elias felt one brush the back of his neck. He froze mid-step. A sound rang out, deeper than thunder, quieter than a heartbeat. A harmonic tone vibrating inside his skull, rearranging the air around him. Then the train lights flashed back on, dim, unsteady. Wrong. Elias blinked, adjusting his glasses. His stomach dropped. The young couple was gone. The businessman was gone. The toddler and mother gone. Every person in the 4 cars he could see gone. The seats were still warm. Steam curled from abandoned coffee cups. A half-knitted blanket lay draped across empty knees. 10 seconds ago he watched these people breathe. Now there was nothing but silence. "No, no, no, no," Elias whispered, stumbling backward. Where did they go?" He sprinted toward the next car, throwing open the door. Empty. He ran to the next. Empty. The entire train was deserted. Every passenger vanished as if plucked out of the world in an instant, except him. From above, the watchers pulsed with faint blue acknowledgement. Data collected, mind scanned, unsuitable samples discarded. The train left the tunnel. Moonlight spilled across the seats. The outside world returned, but the passengers did not. Elias collapsed into a chair, trembling violently. His clipboard fell to the floor with a metallic clatter that echoed far too long in the empty car. He stared at the window. A reflection appeared beside him. Not his, tall, angular, shimmering, a shape that had no right to exist. It leaned close to the glass. Its face, if it even had a face, was a cluster of shifting planes illuminated from within by faint, pulsing symbols. Elias whimpered. The reflection tilted its head. Then it disappeared. The train rolled into the next station with perfect punctuality. When the doors opened, confused staff boarded. They found Elias curled on the floor, pale, shaking, eyes wide with horror. They asked him what happened. He opened his mouth. Only 2 words came out. They chose. From the height of a god's gaze above Appalachia, the watchers receded into the darkness, data collected, anomalies logged, the conductor tagged for observation. They would return. The night was theirs, and that brings this file to a close. UFO Chronicles Archive will continue uncovering the hidden events lurking in the dark. Make sure to subscribe, because the next story might have happened in your town.